Hey legends, my name is Mo and welcome to the Can Will podcast. I'm a Royal Marine who is dedicated to optimising human performance and want to bring you exposure to the fantastic people supporting the same aim. In this episode I speak to an individual who serves the UK as one of the highest ranking civil servants whilst managing her family in the process. We talk about the pressures of motherhood and juggling the two halves of her life while she strives to be better tomorrow than today. Episode 11, Helen Halliwell. So Helen, thank you very much for joining me today. I very much appreciate it. I want to start off by asking, when you were a little girl, did you ever envisage that you'd have a career in the civil service?
No, gosh, I don't think I even knew what the civil service was until after I graduated. From a really young age, actually, I'd always wanted to be a doctor. From the age of kind of 9, 10, that was my whole focus. So all of my work experience, all the books I'd read, subscribing to British Medical Journal while I was still at school and quite young, it was all about focusing on that. But whilst I got a place at university to study, I didn't get the grades that I needed. So I went through clearing, as lots of people do when they first don't get their kind of first choice, and studied pharmacology and physiology instead, which was good, but I didn't enjoy it as much because you don't have the people aspects. It was really science-based. So then I was like, what on earth do I do now? Because medicine's all I'd ever wanted to do. And I saw at a graduate recruitment fair, there was a glossy brochure for the Ministry of Defence. And it had people flying in helicopters outside number 10 in the House of Parliament. I thought, that looked quite interesting. And I kind of always been interested in the armed forces, having grown up near Yeovilton. But for other reasons, I didn't think it was a career choice for me. So this seemed like a good thing to go and explore. And that's kind of how it all started. And I can't believe it's 20 years ago this year.
We've got the same career length because I was
wow
as well. So
fantastic.
2 decades, eh? That's quite a
See,
long
look how I've aged compared to you. You still look really young. I'm clearly doing the wrong bit.
It's because I'm not frowning. I've got really bad frown lines. You see that? It's terrible. So how did you find life in the civil service?
So on the whole, I've absolutely loved it. I found, particularly in defence, there's so many different jobs that you can do all within the same department. I haven't counted, but I think I'm probably on job 17 or 18 within that time. So I've done some at short career, and you can just do some really different things, whether it's policy or whether it's getting involved in operations. Did a little bit on finance side, obviously doing a bit on HR. I've done strategy, policy, and I've had tours in other government departments too. So I spent a couple of years in the prison service. I spent a year with DFID in the Department for International Development. So I've managed to get outside defence as well. I think defence will always be my core home department, but I think it's quite refreshing and good to get out and go and work in other government departments too. But really enjoyed it because the work that you do, I think my values are, really associated. I have a strong calling for what defence does and what it stands for. And working with the armed forces, working with a mix of services, just brings another dimension and another richness to the experience.
Yeah, amazing. And so what role have you got at the moment?
At the moment, I'm the Director of Armed Forces Personnel. I have been in this role for for 2 years now. Crikey, that's gone quick. It's quite broad and it seems to be continuously growing. So I'm responsible for Armed Forces pay, pension allowances. So some, billions of pounds of public sector money. I'm responsible for modernising terms and conditions for service, so bringing in flexible service, part-time roles for people in the armed forces. I have the defence accommodation strategy portfolio, which is we're obviously trialling the future accommodation at the moment, where people have a bit more choice about buying and renting out in the private sector. And then I have the service justice system and service complaints, although we're looking to make some changes on where that might sit from the 1st of April. So news coming up on that. And then I have the Armed Forces Health, Wellbeing and Welfare portfolio, which includes things around the Armed Forces Covenant as well. So quite broad, but obviously I don't do it by myself. I've got a team of about 160 military and civilian that support me in that.
And so what is day-to-day life like for you in terms of your schedule? I mean, you've got a few bits going on there.
Yeah, the schedule is the crazy bit. It is back-to-back meetings all day. But I have got much better in the last year about putting in time to do learning and development activities, or putting in time to to read papers or, track the 150, 200 emails that come in every day. So I've got much better at kind of putting in some time to do that, because before that was getting crunched up into, nighttime or weekends, and it's not sustainable, I don't think, to do that year after year after year. You get some jobs where are going to be really busy, but I don't think it's sustainable to do that throughout your whole career. So I'm much better at putting time in for clearing board papers and that kind of stuff. And also for putting in breaks. So COVID and homeschooling 2 kids, so mine are 11 and 8. So it forced me to put in a half-hour break mid-morning, half-hour break mid-afternoon, just to go and check on them, and obviously enough time to make them some lunch, because normally you just work through all of that if you're in the office and you're not having them. So that was a really good discipline, and one actually that I really hope to keep now they've gone back to school, just to make sure I am at least getting half an hour lunch break. And I've actually started doing walking meetings as well. So I had a walking meeting yesterday and the day before. If it's just a one-on-one, I don't need to write loads of stuff down, then doing it on the phone with a pair of headphones and just getting outside from fresh air has really made a difference and breaks up the day a bit.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually. And I'm thinking now about trying to, where I can implement that in my day now the weather is getting better.
I'm pretty firm as well about putting stuff in the calendar, so I make it really clear when I start work and when I finish, because it's not fair on the kids, or you've got kids' responsibilities. Even when they are at school, I still need time to pick them up, drop off, all that kind of stuff. So I think being really clear in our calendars are accessible to everybody in defence. So people, then do not choose to put meetings in when it says that I'm not working.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And
I mean, anyway, it doesn't always work, but I think it's important to start with some kind of framework.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to, I don't want to underestimate the work that you do, because for the people that will listen to this, you've been absolutely incredible in your pursuit towards the betterment of mental health for armed forces and veterans. And now listening to where your sort of journey started in medicine and your connection with people, that makes sense now why you had a passion for that particular strand in your many strands of work.
Yeah. I also was really fortunate through uni and college to work for the British Nursing Association. So I used to work just as a healthcare assistant, but I did it for many years as I was going through education, and I got to work in so many different settings, everything from nursing homes to hospitals, to the orthopaedic hospital at Stanmore, to psychiatric wards, to community-based people with mental ill health. So I got to see a whole range of different kind of healthcare settings, which also kind of helped drive that passion, I think, too. So it's great now that I'm working on armed forces health, wellbeing and welfare, and particularly mental health, and being the defence mental health champion as well gives me just another platform to be able to go and talk and hopefully invigorate activity.
Yeah, and make no mistake, the work that you do is incredible, and it does have benefit at the grassroots level. So I know that there can be a disconnect from essentially the top of the tree to the roots, but it does filter down and it is noticed. So I just want to say thanks for that.
Thank you.
What is it about people that you want to be around and work with and invest into?
Crikey.
Well, just anyway, because
in defence, do you mean?
Already in the last sort of 10 minutes, everything's been geared around working with people and trying to help people, invest in supporting others. So there's obviously a passion and connection there.
Well, yeah, I think people are just obviously fascinating, and understanding people's stories and the reasons perhaps why they do the things they do. Understanding the power of people and what people can collectively do together, understanding just how resilient people are and the kind of challenges that they overcome, and just drawing real inspiration from what others are able to do. I think, it kind of hits every level, hits the emotional level, the intellectual level, the physical, the moral, the spiritual, the values-based. It kind of hits all those different levels for me, I think.
I'd like to shift tack slightly, and we've helpfully provided a context of your professional career. But what I'm really, really interested in is more to do with the balance of your personal life and moreover your family. You've got and you are having a very successful career, and I'm under no illusions that there would have been highly stressful times and difficulties along the way, like everybody else would have had would have had. But I really want to try and identify the relationship between your personal and your professional, obviously trying to be super mum and have a career. And so can you remember your first thoughts when you fell pregnant, obviously other than elation, hopefully, when with your first child? What was your thoughts with regards to your professional career? Because it's probably arguable to say that it's different now for women in the workplace anyway, not necessarily defence, than it was maybe 11 years ago. So can you remember your first thoughts on how am I going to deal with this?
Yeah, I can. And it is kind of linked to work stuff as well. So before I fell pregnant with George, I'd actually had 3 miscarriages in quite quick succession. And the doctor had said to me that one of the reasons was the pressurized work environment that I was in. So it was a conscious choice to leave that job because I was trying to get pregnant, and the doctor just said, look, it's not going to work. And it wasn't actually in defence, interestingly. So I moved to another government department, and within the month fell pregnant again. And I've been given this 9-month project. So
not the baby then.
It
wasn't the baby that was the project.
And I was like, right, well, I really have got to deliver this project in 9 months. It was setting up the civil service stabilisation cadre in DFID. And he came, and I had everything ready. The ball papers were going to finally sign it off on the Monday. And Friday, 6 weeks before he was due, my waters break. And I had George 6 weeks early. And I remember the team at DFID hadn't got my calls over the weekend to say I can't be at this board meeting where everything was going to get signed off, and then I'd go on a lovely period of maternity leave before he was due. So it was quite funny. On Monday, had to have an emergency cesarean because he wasn't well. And I got the phone out after I came out of the recovery theatre. There was all these missed calls from work. So they were actually the first people to know that I'd had a baby, because they're like, I can't be at the full meeting, I've just had a baby. And obviously they were all delighted and all that kind of stuff. So that was quite amusing. But yeah, it was a very conscious decision to move to somewhere which would facilitate that. And then I had a year off with George. Actually, it was 15 months in the end because he wasn't very well to start with, but absolutely all fine now. And when I came back, I made a conscious decision to come back part-time. And there were very few jobs at my grade that were part-time. That was one of the issues. And I think we have made a step change in that. There are a lot, and I think now actually all jobs have to be available as part-time or job share.
Sorry, did you ever feel pressure about wanting to go back to work?
No, not really. I'd always said right from the beginning I wanted a year off. And then actually with the leave and the fact that I didn't have the month off before I was expecting because he came early, I could stretch that out a bit longer. I did some temporary work in the department to start with because there wasn't a full kind of a permanent role for me part-time. But I did my first one, which was actually setting up the Armed Forces Covenant way back in 2010. So when it very first came out, writing the first publications annual report for that and setting up the very first Armed Forces kind of covenant policy. And the person who had been doing it 4 days a week. And I really respected her, thought she was brilliant. But I was like, I'm sure I can do this in 3 days a week because I only wanted to work 3 days a week. And that was certainly my first mistake, is trying to cram what was probably a full-time job into 3 days.
Can you remember what the driver behind it was?
I really wanted that job. I really wanted to work on the Armed Forces Code. I thought it'd be a brilliant job to do. It was really outward facing, working with a lot of local authorities, other government departments, working with the charity sector. It was something new. It was something that was going to benefit the Armed Forces community. So I really wanted that job. And then thinking about the team structure around me, I thought if I build up other elements of the team, then I could probably manage it 3 days a week. And I did. I did do that for just over a year and a half, nearly 2 years, I think. And then I applied for I got pregnant again with my second, and then I applied for the senior civil service whilst I was pregnant. You have to bid for it way in advance. It's quite a long process, and it's a 2-day assessment centre. But I remember because it's quite interesting, a lot of people say, when is the best time to go for promotions or go for the next big job? And I don't know if there is ever a best time. It's a bit like having children. People say, oh, I think you're just really lucky about when it happens. And I think you have to manage the events rather than pre-plan them too much. So really lucky to be pregnant. I passed the SCS assessment centre But then I went off on another year's maternity leave before I had a chance to pick it up. So then my first job back in the department on promotion was after I'd been out of the department for a year, and I was in a job share. So I'd never worked in a job share before, and I'd never worked at that senior grade before. So that was quite daunting for me. Share? So I was doing, there was two of us in the same job. So Ruth Bailey, who was my job share partner, she worked Monday to Wednesday. I'd work Wednesday to Friday, and we'd do some handover joint stuff that we needed to do on the Wednesday. So I'd obviously had lots of chats with her before we agreed to this. She came to the house a few times to make sure that our styles were very different, but our values and what we wanted to get out of the job were the same. But she'd been doing the job by herself for 6 months, 9 months. So there was all those kind of anxieties that you get. Oh my God, this is like a third job at SCS. She's already been doing it full time. How am I going to add value? I've been out of talking to adults for about a year because it's all been with babies. So there was lots of, but Ruth was brilliant, and you soon get back into the swing of it.
And how did you manage to go back to work? Because, and I say that in terms of child care, the support for your home life. I know, what was your situation?
We've tried some different things, to be honest. At that stage, so I was working part-time and we paid for a nanny, but I was literally working to pay the nanny. It wasn't much left over. And I know a lot of people are in similar situations with childcare. You were literally working to pay for that childcare support. We don't have any family nearby. So my mum lives in France. My in-laws are 2 hours away. My dad's 3 hours away. So we don't have any family near us to help. So we knew that whatever we did, we have to be completely self-contained.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just want to go back. There's a couple of really interesting points I'd like to discuss. So one was about working to pay for a nanny, and like you say, there's many other families that are in that situation. When we're talking about career progression, is essentially the juice worth the squeeze? So at the time when you're working to pay the nanny, I'm guessing it wasn't a very nice thought to go, well, we're not really getting a lot out of this. But looking back on that, was it worth doing that to keep your career going?
Absolutely, for me, because it wasn't just about the financial benefit. It was the benefit of me mentally, physically going out to work, and being able to contribute in some other way. I mean, fantastic. But obviously, people contribute. As full-time mums, it's a full-time job. So, but for me, having the ability to go out for work, it was more than just a financial reward. It was more about having another optics to your life, I guess.
The other point was going back with 2 young children. Were there any pinch points, stress points of trying to juggle both those, your career and your kids? Were there ever anything that you sort of regretted in terms of, I missed that sports day, or I couldn't do that you normally would have done it had you not had the career that you've got?
Yeah, all the time. I think that's a constant juggle all the time, and you kind of just have to. So people often talk about a work-life balance. I don't think that in any one day my life is particularly balanced across the two. I think some days work get more of me, like perhaps today because I started really early and I know I'm going to finish late, but yesterday maybe the kids got more of me. So I kind of think as long as it's in balance over a period of time, then that for me is okay. But I don't feel that it's balanced every day. And there's certainly things that I've missed, but I have always exploited the flexible working. So I tried, until Rosie was 2, Rosie's my youngest, I worked part-time. It was only when she was 2 and went to a nursery at the same school that George was at that I came back full-time. But yeah, you miss stuff. But I try and put stuff in the diary. If it's sports day, then I'll take annual leave or work flexibly. If it's something really important, but other things I have missed. I know I missed an assembly that one of them was in, or one time when one of them was playing the drums at a recital, and you miss it, and you do feel guilty about it. But I think you've got to have a bit of self-compassion too. I think the benefits of having a mum that works, that can bring in some other optics, for me is helpful too. But yeah, it's definitely, you definitely do miss things. And I miss things at work. So there's lots of things I can't do at work because I want to be home. There's lots of courses that, are a week long. And I remember, I was feeding Rosie until she was quite old, or is it George? So I couldn't go on a week's long course, and they're like, was a prerequisite for doing something else. I was like, well, I can't do it because I can't be away for a week, and my husband works full time, and we have to really balance the childcare. So we normally have set days where we do drop off and pickups, and then we always do a diary recce, kind of the Sunday the week before, to say, okay, is that all still doable, kind of thing, because we're an hour and a half away from London as well, so it's a 3-hour round-way commute. So if you don't get on that 4 o'clock train, you can't be at school for 5:30 to pick them up from after school club. So
I was speaking to a friend of mine, and she is a fairly high up consultant. She does very well for herself. She's very good at what she does. And she was saying that it got to the point where she had that both of those areas of her life were firing on all cylinders. The kids were young, work is going through the roof. And she felt like she wasn't good at anything because she couldn't give her time to either area to be good at, one or the other. And she ended up being in the middle and felt like she was turning around on the spot because she didn't know, like she didn't have a handle on, not that she didn't have a handle on anything, but it was more to do with, I don't feel that I'm adding value in either area.
Yes, completely relate to that. You don't feel that you're nailing either sometimes. And I think that's when you perhaps need to stop, pause, and to say, look, are your kids happy? Are they, and it's funny when you said earlier, you're successful in your career and you're a good mum or whatever. And I it's kind of thing where you probably need to ask work or the kids that, because they're the ones that determine that rather than me. But I think there are definitely times when you think that you're not nailing either of it. And I think it's really important to just do a check and just say, okay, actually, what have I achieved recently? What are the pluses? And, even if it's as basic as writing some stuff down, and are the kids happy? And actually overall, make sure you've got, and I just think sometimes I'm sure that people without children probably feel that they're not always nailing the job all the time. I think we probably put additional pressure on ourselves, thinking that we have to be super mum and everything has to be home cooked and the children have to be immaculate, having done all their homework. I mean, COVID reality of that was if the kids spent a bit more time on their gadgets, and I'd like them to just have a
yellow dinner every now and then, nuggets and chips in the oven.
Well, yeah, I think that's reality, isn't it?
I think it's. I'd like to go back to a point that you mentioned about your immediate support as well, about parents not being close. And there's a saying that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, you clearly didn't have a village. So, what effect did that have on your family?
I'm not sure that we have really. I mean, as the kids got older, it was possible for them to say spend a week with their grandparents, but it was only since in the last couple of years we've really been able to do that, and obviously we haven't with COVID. So it is tricky, but we haven't seen mum since Christmas 19, so well over a year now, because obviously being in France is really hard to get to. So I know she's really feeling it, and we're trying to do all the Zooms and stuff. No, I mean, it's just seeing them the weekends that you can see. We probably only see them 2 or 3 times a year, even pre-COVID, to be honest, because life's just really busy, isn't it? And the kids are busy at weekends, you're busy at weekends, plus that's your only downtime. That's the only time where it's just the 4 of you, where you can go and do your own, get back together and rebuild together after a really busy week.
Did you ever have any times where juggling the both, you just thought, I can't do this? And if you did have thoughts like that, what did you do to continue to move forward?
So there was a point, I think, when both of them were really young, and the commute to London just felt quite tough, and rushing back, and you're missing stuff at work in the evenings because you're rushing back, but then you're rushing back and you're not getting that good quality time with the kids because it's late and it's dinner and bed and that's kind of it. But I did think, do I just do a different type of job? One that's just less one that perhaps I'd find less demanding. But I don't think I'd have been satisfied doing that. And I also think I'd have made ways to find it more challenging. I remember when I was at school, just finished school and just in a summer job, I decided to work in a cake and biscuit factory. It was a real just dolloping, just for a few weeks, dolloping cream on a cake type of stuff. And, within a couple of weeks, I kind of reinvented one of the whole product lines about how you pack the boxes and how you stack them, and got it much more efficient and got the line down to 2 instead of 3 and save people. It's just, I don't feel that I don't think I'd be happy. And I don't think I'd always want to be making any improvements I can see. Not saying that, I think I'd always try and want to better things.
Looking back on that time with the two, when the kids were really young, looking back now, what would you tell yourself, if you could, in your younger self, about that period and how to tackle that particular dynamic of balancing work and home?
Yeah, I think actually I'd have probably give myself a bit more of a break, or just split it with my husband a bit. So we always, kids used to wake up early as they do, kind of 5:30, 6, and my son still is a 5:30, 6 getting up every morning, which is not what time I want to get up on a Saturday or Sunday. So I think, and we did used to tag team it when they were up really early so that one of us got a line. But I think now I'd say, just get a break for an hour on a Saturday or a Sunday, and just, it's okay to go for a walk by yourself.
Just come back, because Dad's not going to be able to handle it on his own.
But I do think it's important just to have that time on your own. Even if it's just going to the cafe and reading the papers for an hour. And I perhaps didn't do enough of that. And I think perhaps if I had done that, I'd have come back a bit more refreshed, otherwise it's all work and it's all kids, and there's very little time for you to do your own thing. So maybe I should have stayed playing tennis, or, whatever it was.
It's that self-care element, isn't it? It's trying to make time for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And I say this to a few people
that.
When trying to do some like mentor coaching type stuff. And when I speak to women that are in a situation where they've got kids, are trying to balance work, and I say to them, what do you do for yourself? They said, I'll do PT 3 times a week. And I said, so for 90 minutes a week, you give yourself time. And then they say, oh yeah, I didn't really see it like that. But it's really difficult. It's really difficult to try and prioritize you.
And I think you feel guilty about it. I think you kind of think, well, no, this is my time to be with the family. I must be with the family all the time. And, now they're a bit older, it's different, but it's about the quality time, isn't it? It's about having that quality time. And I think you can perhaps have more quality time, making sure you're rested and you do feel that you've done a bit.
And I read a really interesting post on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, actually, and it was the difference between self-care and being selfish. And self-care is about looking after yourself to be good for other people. And selfish is about just looking after yourself regardless of other people. And I think it's really difficult to try and distinguish between the two,
really good point.
Because then it makes it okay to go for that walk for an hour, rather than thinking, oh, I need to be doing other things. How did the prioritization of work? So when the diary clash happens, who gets the? I'm having that meeting.
Oh, it's hilarious conversations. Yeah, it's hilarious because we're both the same grade now, so we're both directors. He's director in the cabinet office. I'm in defence. So it's a bit like who trumps who.
Is it who tasks you what?
It's like, well, I'm with Secretary of State, and he's like, well, I'm with the Prime Minister, or it's a bit like that. No, we're pretty good, to be honest, and we're also good at trying to. We're really aware that people see what we're doing. So you've got to role model this stuff. You've got to kind of, if you're going to talk about it, you've got to then walk the walk. So it's really important that we are seen to be doing that stuff, and for our teams to know that, we're not going to be at all of the meetings, and that's okay, and that's why you have a team and not just one individual. So yeah, it's a process. It's been a lot easier during COVID, to be honest, because there hasn't been so much evening stuff going on, and we haven't had the travel. So it's been much easier now. At the moment, it's just he does school pick up and drop off, but we've sorted that. I'm doing all the drop offs, and he's doing all the pickup. So it's it's easy. But yeah, other times it's just about compromise, isn't it? But I think it's really important if you're not at the same grade, because we can be so hierarchical in defence, can't we? And I can imagine that a lot of people perhaps aren't, may not see themselves at a level, but it's not about that. It's about respect for each person's career. So it's not necessarily who's the most senior, who's seen the most senior person. It's it's respect for each other's careers, and I think that's really important. So it's not necessarily about, I would be a bit slightly tongue-in-cheek about who's seeing who, but it is about having respect, I think.
And do you think generally, this isn't a defence specific question, but generally speaking, what's your suggestions on trying to enable more women to return to work if they chose to? That, because that's always I listen to a lot of stuff on the radio or watch TV about, well, women have to go back to work after. Well, if they choose to, they might choose not to, and that's okay as well. But how would you? Absolutely. What would you suggest to make that easier? For what systems, structures would you have in place to support childcare, for instance? To be, because some people's expenditure on childcare might be more than what they're earning.
So I think in terms of coming back to work, if you want to, then find an organisation that shares your values, and finding a job that you really enjoy doing is really important, because if you're going to spend time away and make those sacrifices, do it for an organisation that's going to appreciate it and for work that you enjoy doing. And then in terms of kind of practicalities, I think it's, you just have to look at the options that you can afford, I think. So, we can't, I think, and from my personal perspective, a nanny is easiest, but we can't afford a nanny at the moment. The kids we've chosen to put the kids in a prep school, and I chose to come back full time in order to do that, because the school has breakfast and after school clubs, which the local school didn't. And it also has all of their activities all in one place. So I don't have to do all the school runs after school and stuff. So instead of paying for all those extra activities after school and at weekends, they do it all through the school. But that means that we can't afford any kind of other wraparound care. It's all based on the school. I make use of the childcare vouchers. So that saves us, I think it's about £2,000 each for each working parent. You can use those up to the age of 16 for your kids, or even older if they've got any special educational needs. You can pay, I use those to pay for breakfast club and after school club, and also holiday club. So they're there at the school for a week's holiday club over Easter. They've got 3 weeks off. So 1 week at Easter, they're at the school. They've only got 1 week holiday club going on. With Andy will take 1 week off, and I'm taking off the other week, trying to cover it. So that's what we do. So I guess it's like looking at what providers are there. I know I also looked at childminders, so ones that look after children in their own home. But we're lucky to live where we do, and I kind of wanted the kids to enjoy what we have. So that just there's loads of different options out there. And obviously, I think if grandparents lived closer, they'd really want to be involved and do a bit more of that. So I do think it's, having those conversations with families are really important, because I know, for example, my sister-in-law, so my mother-in-law did provide a lot of childcare for her, used to do all of the children's pickups, used to look after them after school every day. So, it's a conversation to be had with family for sure. There's loads of different options, and it's looking at what can you afford, and then that kind of drives how far can you commute to work, what kind of company can you work at, what's around you, where do you live, it kind of drives all those kind of decisions, I think.
If we use an example of a family where a child's been born and the maternity is coming to an end, to try and, or even school, if you don't have the option for school before and after school clubs, trying to get a job between the hours of 9:30 and 2:30 is almost non-existent.
It's really hard, and that's what drove me to use the prep school, was because the school didn't have a before or after school. So then I'd be paying for somebody to come in for an hour and a half, and it's really hard to find people who want to do that. So I had put an advert out for somebody who'd come and look after the kids, from what was it? We need to leave at kind of 7:30 or early if one of us is doing the early shift. And it's really hard to find people who just want to do those hours either end of the school day. So that's why we ended up moving, a bit like working to pay the nanny. Now it's working to pay the school fees, but that's a choice we've made. And George is in his last year before he goes to state school next year, so that'll be a bit easier from September. But it's a choice you make, isn't it? And I made that on the basis that there was no breakfast or after school club. We couldn't get somebody who would look after the kids earlier or sooner. Plus, when you think about all the clubs and stuff afterwards, and yes, I realised really, really lucky to have that as a choice. But it is really tricky. It's really hard to find jobs that are just within school hours. It tends to, I guess, it tends to be some of those who are able to work flexibly from home, whether it's own business. And I think companies are much better at that. But I know, my sister found it really difficult. She's got 3 kids, and she just said it wasn't worth her going back to work. They had their own restaurant, her and her husband, before they had kids. And a restaurant is really hard to have when you've got kids because of the hours. It's completely the opposite when kids are at school. So he changed profession, and she said it's not worth me going back to work because of the childcare costs. But she found bits to do with the son's kind of football league and stuff like that, which is now paid. But it is really hard. It's a real challenge, I think, particularly if you have to commute and add those hours in too.
So you said that you had 2 years in total out with after you had both of your children. Do you think that when you went back to work that you felt that there was any disadvantage of having that year out?
So I probably only in my head was it difficult, because it hasn't actually borne out by reality on the whole. So a lot of people I joined with back in 2001, actually it's a really good record. It'd be interesting to see the actual stats, but I and some of my other female colleagues have promoted faster than they have, even though they haven't had those years off and we have. So I haven't found that a lived reality in defence, actually. I've still managed to keep up, if not promote sooner than some of the male colleagues that I joined at. So I don't think having a year out has had a bearing. Having had over 2 years out has really had a bearing on that. I think it's those blockers you put in your head. You think that might be the case, and it might be different in the forces because of certain things that you have to jump through to get certain promotions. But it's all competitions now in the senior civil service are fair and open competition, so they're all advertised externally on the jobs website, and you apply and interview in the usual way. So no, I'm quite lucky in that I don't think it has. It was only your own internal fears that might happen.
I spoke with JJ Chalmers last week, and he said, I recorded a podcast with him as well, but he said he made a comment in that podcast which really sort of gave me food for thought to try and explain maybe a way forward. And he said it for him, certainly with a disability, it's not about equality. We shouldn't be looking at making equality. He said we should be trying to make equity. He said it's equity over equality. It's giving people the opportunity to be able to thrive and progress. And I never heard that in that phrase before. And I've been thinking about it since. And actually, because I asked him as well, how do you make that look like it's fair? And he said, but people don't ask to be injured. People don't ask to have a learning disability difficulty. People don't ask to have a mental illness, or you might choose to have a child, but it's not the woman's fault for being pregnant. You see what I mean? And he said it's about, for him, it's about creating the equity for you to be able to still flourish and thrive regardless of that. And I thought that was a really interesting concept.
It's not positive advantage or positive discrimination. I don't know if you've seen that diagram with the ladder, 2 people going up the wall. A shorter person needs a longer ladder, a taller person doesn't need. So you're giving them 2 different size ladders, but they're both at the equal place at the wall. It's a similar thing. You might need slightly different mentoring, coaching, support to get to the same place.
Superficially, that would look like there's a disproportionate allocation of resources to certain people, which wouldn't look fair. But so I suppose it's the education piece to say, well, no, we're making it is fair. We're giving the equity to that person to have the same as what you've got. You don't need it, and that's great. That's really, really good. We're double thumbs up for you. But this person needs a little bit more opportunity than you do. Doesn't mean to say we value them any more than you. And I think that might be where messaging sometimes, not necessarily, again, not a defence, generally is missed, because it's the education piece to try and promote why it's happening, which isn't, again, the positive discrimination. It's more to do with affording the opportunity to people that might not have the same as someone else.
Yes. Or might not have been able to have done all the same steps in a career because they've been out for 2 years, or you can't do it because you can't spend 3 weeks away on a course or 4 weeks away on a course. It would be quite hard. I mean, Andy and I have managed kind of courses where we are away, and he's travelled with work. He's been to Afghanistan, Iraq, and I've been. So we have been away for a few weeks at a time each time, but it does take an effort on the other person. And the other person has to completely rejig their diary because we don't have anybody else to support us. So the other person takes a hit for that. When I went to Sydney for the Invictus Games, which was obviously a huge honour and amazing, but for that whole time that I was out there, he was the one doing every single drop-off, pick-up and sorting out the kids for that whole time. So, it's having that kind of mutual respect and, opportunity, I guess.
Do you think that you've seen any, or have the kids said anything about the professional careers that you're trying to manage in terms of home?
Yeah, I think sometimes I don't feel that we always get the balance right. It was really hard during COVID when we were so busy and they were at home, and just not having the time because you're on back-to-back calls and they're wanting help. And I remember just so there definitely have been those times. But I think overall they're really proud of what we both do and can see that we get a lot from it. And know that we've done really interesting things with it. So, it's given me opportunities, and some just fantastic opportunities that I'm able to come home and talk to them about, which is fantastic.
I think it's really important that we've had this conversation because I'm fascinated. I've got 2 young daughters and I want them to understand that when they grow up, they have choice and they can choose to be amazing and be a stay-at-home mum. And that's for me, that's the hardest job in the world, without any shadow of a doubt. Yes. I mean, how you can do that, I don't understand. Like it's carnage, especially when you increase your volume of children, in a good way, obviously. Or the choice is you can have a professional career, but there's a third choice as well. And I think that conversations like this, that young women and girls can listen to this and say, you know what, it's going to be hard. There's a trade-off, but much the same as being a stay-at-home mum or having a professional career, that's hard as well. And you have to trade off in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think if you're really passionate about something and you know what you really want to do, then you'll find ways to do it. And there's bound to be bumps along the way, and not every day is going to be rosy, but it isn't for anybody. So I think, if you've got a passion or you really want to do something, then you'll find ways of making it work, and you pull all the different levers that you can in order to make it successful. But just be realistic that there are going to be some fantastic highs, and there will be fantastic highs, but there are going to be some bumps, and that's okay. That's life, that's normal. And that's why it's really important that you do the self-care, the self-compassion, the resilience bit, because that's all part of life, I think. But it would be a real shame if people aren't pursuing those dreams because they're putting barriers up before those barriers have happened. So perhaps it's just having the confidence in yourself that there are so many different ways to make it happen.
Helen, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a really insightful conversation, and I hope that this inspires and helps other young women to have successful careers both at home and in their family. So keep doing what you're doing. It's amazing the work that you're doing, even though that on a screen it might not feel like it, but it is.
Thank you. So thank you very much. It's fantastic that you're doing these podcasts, and I hope if it just inspires one person, then that's worth doing. And just a huge thank you for all you're doing on mental health. We've been working together on it for a few years now, but all the stuff that you've been doing through your work on Alt Regain has just been hugely inspiring. So a huge thank you to you too.
Oh, thank you very much, Helen. I'll speak to you soon.
Take care, you.